we're good to go.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this October 22nd, 2018 meeting, special meeting of the Sustainability Commission. I invite you all to stand and to join with me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dan, if you would do the roll call, please.
Chair Jackson.
Present.
Vice Chair Clark.
Present.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Futterman.
Here.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Here.
Commissioner Goins.
Here.
Commissioner McCann.
Present.
Commissioner Santora.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
And Commissioner Friedman is excused.
Commissioner Friedman is at an energy code workshop in the Los Angeles area, and so he's getting smarter than he already is. And we'll bring back good information. So of course he's excused. We will call upon Jay when he's here. But you know, Jay, we're going to let you get settled, and we'll circle back to you after presentations if that's okay, and hear staff comments. Is there anyone here from another commission to make a report? I'm not seeing that there is. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Vice Chair Clark. We did not accept the agenda. Let's back up and do that. The agenda was posted last Thursday as per city regulations. I think we can follow it as it is listed. Is there a motion that we accept the agenda as posted? So moved by Commissioner Gauthier and second from Commissioner Santora. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And we have an agenda. Thank you very much for catching that, Roy. No commission reports. At each meeting of the Sustainability Commission, we allow for time for the general public to speak to us on matters that are related to our general area of responsibility. There is a 3-minute time limit. If there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak, if you'd identify yourself by name and your city of residence, and we invite you to come up to the microphone and the chair and be sure and push the button so that we can record. Is there anyone here for public comment? Yes. Please come up. Thank you. Right here? Sure. Take a seat and there you go.
Hello? Good. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Noble. I am the chair for the Riverside County Climate Reality Project. I was a resident 10.5 years here in Palm Springs. I'm now in Blythe. And I am really... You know, I never thought I would find my tribe until a couple months ago. I was accepted to be at the 3-day training at the LA Convention Center with former Vice President Al Gore. And he walked us through slide presentations on carbon pollution, these greenhouse gases that are causing global warming and the greenhouse effect. We're all aware of that. 111 million tons of carbon emissions being put into our very thin Earth's atmosphere every day. And we are seeing the effects of it globally, from floods to fires to drought to, the acidification of our oceans where the corals are being bleached and dying and at 40% right now. And it's a huge problem. So I'm coming to speak to you on behalf of the chapter. We have formed an official chapter here in Riverside County. And my introduction to you is that there's 3 things that I'd like to just sort of open up with. One is getting the city to be committed to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Boulder's doing it, Park City, Utah. I mean, cities around the country are adopting this principle of getting completely off of fossil fuels because it's killing our planet. It's suffocating us. And so that is my first campaign. And I Matt, would like to ask you for your help in in helping me with the campaign. That means signature gathering. That means building coalitions with community partners for the greater Palm Springs cities, Palm Desert, Indio, et cetera, Palm Springs. So we want to get everybody on board. I'd like to call on a climate reality town hall, and I would like the Sustainability Commission, if possible, to sponsor that. And I'd like all the mayors from the greater Palm Springs cities, the incorporated cities, to come. I want the public to come. I want all of our concerns addressed. So that's number one. Number two is obviously I've given you a form a little bit about climate reality and what the mission and the goals of the organization are. And the stapled paper is an agreement. Please feel free to read that agreement. It is an agreement that I would like the city to sign on to. And you know, the Gore people are very excited. I'm working with our team out of Boulder. I think probably many of you were here and you saw the Inconvenient Truth, the sequel at Richards Auditorium at Palm Springs High School. We're excited. All the windmills, the solar companies here. I think this is a prime location. Am I done? Can I have 30 seconds? Possible?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna jump. So I'm beginning our relationship. The other two things is Dylan DeHaze and his mom, Dawn. Dylan is a 15-year-old from Seattle. He has created 3 beautiful movies, one called The Tipping Point, about climate reality and climate change. The other one is about plastics. The other one is Everything's Connected. And I would like to see if there is a budget to fly him down here to present his movie to all the students at Palm Springs High School in the auditorium and have that sponsored by the commission at a budget of under $2,000. So I think we've got 100% committed. We've got the climate movie with Dylan. It's really good. I mean, his dad does beautiful things with film, so he could also teach film. I think that's 3, right? 100% committed, the town hall, and the film with Dylan and his mom. So I look forward to emailing all of you and sending whatever information that you need to advance our relationship. And we look forward to Palm Springs becoming the first 100% committed to electricity that is carbon-free. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And certainly, anyone who speaks in public comment can always communicate directly with our staff, our director, Jay Verada, or with Dan DeGarmo, our program coordinator. And that way, materials can get to all of the Sustainability Commission. So, great.
I've got a long drive back home, so thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in public comment? And I'll declare public comment closed. Glad that all of you are here. Jay, if it's all right, since we have Joel and Don here, we'll let them make their report and then turn to you for your staff report. Is that okay? Sure. Gentlemen, and pull up an extra chair, please. Gosh, you'd have thought the city might have bought one more chair so that you would have a spot. We invited Joel and Don to come and speak to us. Perhaps many of you know about the Indian Canyon two-way conversion, and I know that some subcommittees from 1PS have heard those reports. But I know that sustainability is interested in it for perhaps other additional reasons, and so we're happy to hear from you and know that you guys are launching into this. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, so Don and I are going to tag team it. Don has a little bit more background. I'll step in, talk a little bit about schedule and cost.
Okay, so here on our screen we have our Indian Canyon two-way project. If you notice the part in blue, that's the part that will be turned from one-way to two-way. So that's between Alejo and Camino Paracela. We're going to change that to where we have 2 northbound traffic lanes going north, if you can see in green in that diagram. And then in white, you have a center turn lane, so you can turn left into either side of the street. And then we have in blue the one southbound lane that also includes the bike lane with sharrows. And if you notice, the width of the street still maintains parking on both sides. And then at every signalized intersection, so the numbers 1 through 11, if you look on the side, those are the signalized intersections. They will all be converted so that you can now make a left turn to southbound Indian Canyon. So if you notice on the bottom, if it says figure 1, alternative number 1, there was a bunch of studies that were done, in 2013, and this was the preferred choice by our city council. As far as pedestrian safety enhancements, I think this is more what our sustainability commission is concerned about. As part of the grant that we got from CVAG, we proposed countermeasures that would help pedestrians get through Indian Canyon. And that was, instead of words, I put pictures up here. And so that included the countdown heads, pedestrian crosswalk, I guess what we call it, detection. So it would detect pedestrians while they're crossing the street. The next, I'm kind of going clockwise here. We have handicap accessible push buttons at every intersection. And then on the lower left, we have high visibility crosswalks, as well as curb bump outs. So that would shorten the time it takes to cross a crosswalk. And then we also have dedicated protected left turns. So that would help with the preventing cars from turning when pedestrians are trying to cross the street. So, when I spoke about the bump outs, if you notice in orange on all the intersections, these are the locations where we can improve our pedestrian experience by not only bumping out the sidewalks, but not only does it reduce the time it takes for a pedestrian to cross the street, it also provides a more pedestrian-friendly experience, meaning while you're waiting to cross the street, usually you're standing shoulder to shoulder next to a bunch of other people, and with this extended curb bumped out, you kind of have more elbow room while you're waiting to cross the street. If you notice on the bottom section between Alejo and Gran Via Valmonte, I just wanted to show that the existing raised median north of Alejo will still remain, but on south of Alejo, that existing median will go away. And then the last thing I wanted to add was, many of you remember this roundabout at Camino Paracela. This was taken out of the project because it's about $1.5 million. So it's going to be its own project. But it's not, it's currently being designed, but we don't have the full funding for it yet. So we are still proceeding with it, but it's not being built with the Indian Canyon two-way project.
So for the project was bid, and in August we got the cost estimate from the contractor, or we got the bids in, and the lowest bid was for $4.46 million for this particular project. The funding for this project came from various sources. There's two CVAG grants. One was for $2 million. It was a CVAG bicycle and pedestrian safety grant. CVAG also gave money for the two-way conversion at $1.5 million. SB1 funds, which right now I believe it's a measure, so they're trying to repeal it. We got SB1 funds in the tune of $790,000. Local Measure A funds, 700,000, and the Measure J funds pitched in about $550,000 for this project. So the project was awarded, but it's a tricky project because we have 170 days to complete the project. But right now, there's only one outfit in the United States that provides poles. The actual poles have about a 20-plus week lead time. So by the time, I don't know if anybody's seen the construction that's happening out there, they're actually potholing, trying to determine, you know, if it's safe to put these bigger poles in the street. So as they're doing that, they uncovered certain areas where there was some conflict, so they're adjusting the design. Well, once all the potholing is done and they're cleared, it's going to take about 20 weeks to receive these poles. So that kind of puts the construction of the poles coming in by April approximately. So and so that there's a struggle right now whether we want to do all the other smaller improvements right now or you know, try to postpone them. So we're in discussions right now as to how exactly we're going to proceed with the construction of the project. Let me see, the schedule, traffic circle, that's about kind of the gist of our presentation. If you guys open for questions, we'll try to.
Sure. So you're saying it's possible that the whole project could sort of be delayed a bit in order to fit into the window of time?
Correct. We won't be able to get the poles in for at least
Sure.
20 weeks after we order them. And as of now, I believe we're still determining the exact design because there was conflicts when we were potholing.
Sure. Commissioners, do you have questions? All right, well, we'll start down the list with Commissioner Wilson.
I'm curious about the pedestrian detection system you mentioned. How does that mesh with the countdown signal?
So it kind of works like bus vehicle preemption or bus or emergency vehicle preemptions, meaning that similar when an ambulance or fire truck, you know, drives to an intersection, they might get an additional 5 seconds of time so that they can get through the intersection. So what the pedestrian detection does is that, like, you know, if you have somebody that's maybe a slower walker that is still in the crosswalk while, you know, the time is kind of running down, counting down 7, 6, 5, 4. It may give an extra 2 or 3 seconds to that pedestrian to walk.
And do we have any of those in the city?
This would be
already?
the first that we're trying. There was a city up north that uses them a lot. I think it was City of San Jose. They use it a lot, and they really like the technology. It's an older technology, but it's reliable. And so we did some research on that, and we're going to try it here with this Indian Canyon project. So.
Okay, Commissioner Santora.
Thank you. So I've got two questions. You said that I guess the entire project is 4.6 million. And then what was the total of grants to offset that number? You had several figures, but I didn't add them up.
I guess your point is it being covered completely by those grants?
That wasn't my point, but that's a great question.
So
I don't think it is, though.
the balance remaining right now, because it's not just the construction costs, there's design costs associated, project administration. With all the grants and all the costs associated, we have a balance remaining of about $9,000. So the grants do cover the majority of the
bad.
project.
And then the second question is related back to the intersection where the roundabout is ultimately planned. From the diagram, it appeared that there's going to be a three-way stop light signal system there. Is that correct? If you go back to the other one, Dan,
Right.
with the several different diagrams on it. That one, yep. Fast. There it is. Looks like the one in the upper
Yeah, it's
left
not
there is.
quite a three-way because you got 5 legs. It does behave a lot like a three-way stop, like a T intersection, but there's not an easy answer for you. But if it helps you understand it a little better, yeah.
Right, because there's 5 entry points.
Entry
in that
points,
same-
right. Yeah. But the majority of the intersection behaves like a 3-point intersection.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, thank you.
yeah.
Commissioner Goins?
I also had 2 questions. So the corner there just south of Ramon with the 5-way intersection is going to basically be as we see it in that drawing. There's not going to be some other interim step that we see. It's pretty much just going to be the bump outs, the only change that's going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my other question was, what was the expectation regarding redirection of traffic, since Indian Canyon's probably not going to be as quick to get down? You know, it won't be quite as fast for folks. What's the expectation about how traffic will be redirected?
I don't know if there's an expectation, but generally, traffic will find a different route. The people that want to go speed through this area, which is what we don't want, will start looking to use other streets to do that, to circumvent this area.
But there were no studies done to kind of,
Oh, there was a full traffic study that was done in conjunction with Palm Canyon Drive, as you know, the sister street in the other direction, and we received grants for that project, which is separate but coming as well. So
okay.
yeah, but
Wow.
it was fully traffic studied, and yeah.
I would imagine that there would be, people would go down Farrell and a couple of other roads that are easier to go down now. I mean, is that the,
Sunrise.
so it'll slow
Farrell.
down traffic between Indian
Caballeros.
Canyon and?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's, yeah,
yeah.
okay.
I'll look to this end of the table. Okay, I just had a couple of comments, which was part of my motivation of inviting you gentlemen. I know that when this has been talked about a long time, and the newspaper reported it, and one of the comments that the mayor had was about pedestrian safety and cyclist safety. So, but there are no, he was at least quoted in the paper as mentioning that, no cycle routes marked on Indian Canyon, are there, or do you gentlemen know?
What the plans show is Sharrowed. So
It does show
Sharrowed.
Sharrows?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So, shared lanes both north and southbound?
Yes.
As far as you know?
far as
Okay,
I know,
all right.
yes.
So, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. I think maybe it sounds like we're late to the party. I know that we've been hearing about this for a long time, and the grants are out. I guess what I'm hoping is that as this plan unfolds, there isn't anything that's going to prevent future enhancements for additional pedestrian safety, shade structures. I guess what I'm hoping is that Indian Canyon is going to be as beautiful and utilitarian a streetscape as is Palm Canyon Drive. Given the Agua Caliente's improvements on their side of the street and the Town and Country improvements and the Andaz Hotel and other South End development projects, I'm hoping that we get the best project possible. So the best project possible for vehicles, for pedestrians, for safety, comfort, walkability, for cyclists, that we have another beautiful second street. So I've communicated with some of the council members about that, and just as newer staff members, that's at least my wish, that street becomes another north-south main street for us. So, yes, Commissioner Baker.
So then that raises a question. Most of the businesses there sort of face away from Indian Canyon, especially the new hotel. At least my understanding, it's all looking towards Palm Canyon. And as you go south, there's really not a lot of store frontage. It's a lot of parking lots until you get like to Bill's Pizza. No, that's on Palm Canyon. There's like not a lot facing Indian to create that walkability. If I was going to walk, I definitely would go down Palm Canyon as opposed to Indian Canyon.
Okay. There are some vacant development parcels for sure. And I do know that the Agua Caliente Museum, I believe, is not directed toward Indian Canyon, or at least the current design. But I don't think that means that that street isn't going to be a walkable street. If anytime that we have big events downtown, there are always people on Indian Canyon, and there are restaurants and others. So my hope is that we don't do anything in terms of design or limit the walkability and pleasant pedestrian experience for the future. That's my point.
Go ahead. Well, I guess staff understands that, and I think there's a staff member right now pursuing a SCAG grant that can become a demo project for Indian for walkability.
Oh,
So
that'd be super.
So
Okay,
we are
great.
thinking of it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Santora, did you have a?
Yeah, just one more question. I'm looking at the diagram here for the Alejo intersection.
Yes.
And it's kind of hard to see from here, but people going southbound on Indian Canyon it looks like there's going to be one left turn lane and one either straight or right turn lane. Is that correct onto Alejo? It's kind of hard to tell from here.
Going southbound?
Southbound
Yeah, there's going to be a left turn onto, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking.
onto
for-
Alejo.
Yeah.
And then what about the right-hand lane? That's going to be both right and straightforward?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's straight and it's through and right combined.
Okay, and will there be an
And a
opportunity?
dedicated left.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Dedicated lane. All right, so I guess the concern would be a bottleneck in that lane. You said you've had lots of studies on this. What is the expectation for that lane in particular? Looks like it's going to be problematic. I'm just wondering what your study showed.
I wouldn't have that
Yeah,
answer
we're
for
not
you.
aware. But I can look into that. If it does become a bottleneck, I can see we could probably make some tweaks to that.
Sounds like there may be pedestrian crossing conflict when cars are trying to turn because there's only the one lane
Right,
that would allow you through.
right.
We'll look at the study and get back to you.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Two
think maybe
questions.
final
Number one,
question.
did we ever
Commissioner.
consider just using a single pedestrian crossing like they do in Pasadena, where you can cross diagonally instead of just going north, south, east, west? There's a time where all pedestrians cross, period.
So on Indian Canyon, you don't have the pedestrian counts to support that scramble type crosswalk. As part of the Palm Canyon project that is also coming in the future, I believe several of those are proposed and included into that project. So, so those will be coming to Palm Springs, just not on Indian Canyon. Yeah, until more people walk there.
And second last, are there any bus routes that will be affected? But I don't know that there's a bus down Indian.
It still goes northbound, and we maintain the northbound lane, so they're not affected. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We appreciate your time. I apologize if it sounded sermonizing on my part. But, I'm delighted you share our concerns. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to circle back, Jay, now that you've had a chance to catch your breath, and
Thank you, Mr.
so we'll
Chair.
circle back to staff comments.
I just want to let the commission know that Gary Calhoun, Chris Cunningham, and I were making the rounds with the hotel general managers and the Palm Springs Hotel Association to let them know about the January 1st deadline for the coming recycling requirements, where those who have more than 4 cubic yards of solid waste will need to obtain services of some kind of a recycling system and have that as part of their operations. So we're getting that word out along with the organics, which is also going to be impacting the businesses here in Palm Springs and throughout California, frankly, to meet those requirements. And we'll also be sending out letters to businesses in regards to that, just to remind them of what they're required to do.
Is that it? Anything else? Okay.
Well, just an update also. Okay.
Oh, all right, okay. Any questions of Jay at the moment? All right. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're back in our more or less regular order to item C, the meeting minutes of our September 24th meeting. Those were emailed to you. I'm sure you emailed any corrections. Is there a motion for approval with any corrections that were submitted to Dan? So moved, Commissioner Baker, second from Commissioner Santora. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no. And we have approved our minutes. Thank you very much. So Gary is here. Recycling report.
Yes, thank you. I have a correction to make for Commissioner Wilson. He asked me a question last meeting that we had regarding the amount of organics that could be taken to the Coachella Valley facility per day. And I told you 750, it's actually 700 is what their daily capacity is, and a 950 max. So they cannot take more than 950 tons of organics per day. So I wanted to correct that. We held our shredding and e-waste event this past weekend, very successful, probably the best one that I've done since we've been here. About 286 people came through, so that's a pretty good improvement. We held it in conjunction with Palm Springs Disposal's fall cleanup, and they had, at last time I checked, they had 117 attendees, so that's a pretty good number as well. And Desert Arc was on site to collect all of the e-waste, and they filled up a complete truck, so they were pretty happy about that. The 2019-2020 cycle beverage container grant is open, and the application is due December 4th. The awards take place usually in April or May. The city receives the monies in September or October, and you have about 20 months from the time that you receive the money to spend it, and you can combine it with others, which I believe that we have actually done to buy some receptacles for the parks. And lastly, Desert Arc is going to come back on Thursday, and we're going to clean up all the e-waste that we've collected through the summer at the city public works yard.
When is the next e-waste shred event?
January 12th.
January 12th. And will that also be in conjunction with Palm Springs Disposal bulky collection?
We're not sure yet, and the reason is because due to cost. Because it costs about $10,000 to $12,000 for Palm Springs to do a spring cleanup and a fall cleanup. But the difference is they pick up items throughout the week. If we were to combine with them on the next one, which I'm hoping that we can do, we've asked them only to be there for that Saturday portion of it, so they wouldn't collect throughout the week. And that's going to be about $3,000. So we're going to see if we can talk, because we get a much better turnout when we combine it with them.
Okay.
So I can tell you for sure they're not going to be collecting it through the week during the January function. But
Okay.
we're trying to talk them into joining us on that Saturday. I'm sorry?
They will again in May, right?
In April. Yes. In April, they'll do their spring cleanup, which is the entire week.
Okay.
And the Saturday.
Okay. Commissioners, questions? I'm sorry, Commissioner Goins.
Hopefully a quick one. So I just wanted a quick reminder while we have you sitting here in front of us regarding the organics ordinance. Is it 8 cubic yards is the limit in 2019 and 4 in 2020? Is that how it works, or can you remind us?
1 January 2019 is 4 cubic yards of solid waste. The difference in the past is the measurement was the organics itself, either 8 cubic yards or 4 cubic yards. 1 January 2019, it switches over to 4 cubic yards of solid waste. Now, you may not produce that much organics, but you're still going to be required to participate in a recycling program.
For organics.
4 organics if you produce more than 4.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And so there is no specific organic mandate, or when is a specific organic mandate?
I'm not sure what you mean by organic mandate.
Is there a date at which if you create more than a specific amount of organic matter to be, that it has to be recycled?
That's the way it's been for a couple of years. It started
And
out
that's
a couple of
changing.
years ago, 2016, when it was 8 cubic yards.
Okay.
Then it was reduced to 4 cubic yards of organics. And now in January 1st of 2019, it'll be 4 cubic yards of trash regardless
Total.
of how much organics you produce.
Thanks for the clarification.
So, and if I can just clarify further, if I understand your question, that if you produce 4 cubic yards of any kind of waste,
Sure.
January 1st, you've got to now start recycling your organics, no matter what proportion of that
Correct.
it is.
There's going to be a point in time when the state evaluates everyone throughout the state's progress towards meeting the goal of, I think it was a 50% reduction by 2020. And depending on the outcomes, they may mandate they may impose the 2 cubic yard requirement for organic waste at that time. So it's, some analysis has to be done, and then they will let us know where we're at.
Commissioner Baker. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you were just helping me find folks. Okay, any other questions of Gary?
Yeah, one question for
Please,
Gary.
Commissioner McCann?
So you said that the max that the Burtec facility can take is 900 and some tons?
950 tons per day. That'll be the max.
And has there been any analysis of whether the increase that's going to be going there because of this tightening of the screws on January 1st, are they going to be able to handle the increase?
What will happen, what I've been told by Burtec themselves is what will happen is they service 7 cities and other areas, unincorporated areas down valley essentially. Palm Springs Disposal handles Palm Springs, Desert Hot Springs, and some portions of unincorporated Riverside County. What is projected to happen if and when we get to the point where it's 950 tons taken there, they will satisfy their 7 customers before they satisfy Palm Springs or Desert Hot Springs.
So it sounds like you're saying we don't know if we're going to exceed their ceiling.
I would think that yes, at some point we will, because everybody's going to have to come on board. So I would make preparations, yes. So that's going to cut you out of the loop, basically.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Right, thank you, Gary.
All right.
All right, we are at Section E, Old Business. First item is status of our leaf blower informational campaign. Lots of pieces to that. Is that you, Jay? You and Dan both?
I believe, yeah. Why don't I hand that one off to Dan, since he's been dealing with Amy a little closer. Yeah.
Until we know exactly what AQMD is going to do, we won't know when the workshop will be. I did get this flyer. I asked the O'Bailey, who's doing the flyer that will be mailed out to all of the city, and they sent me a copy of this, which is what the actual flyer is going to look like that will go out to everyone, every citizen. I'll have your address up at the top. And then it'll show basically, what our brochure did with the workshop listed on the right-hand side and the AQMD information down here at the bottom. The problem with AQMD at this time is the rebates that they're having for businesses is you have to be in an economic
Disenfranchised area.
Yeah, disenfranchised area, which Palm Springs may or may not be in, which we won't know probably until we hear what AQMD is going to do. But Amy did say that in talking with AQMD that there may, I emphasize may, be some other rebates available. My idea is if there are none coming from AQMD, that possibly the Sustainability Commission may want to look at providing resident-only rebates of maybe $50 or $75 for an exchange program. Of course, that's up to you guys, just an idea. But until we hear from what AQMD is going to do, hopefully by the end of next week, then we're kind of stuck until we know what they're going to do.
Okay, so now, just so commissioners know, Vice Chair Clark and I have been a little closer to this than maybe some of you. We have already mailed out a brochure to landscape businesses.
Correct.
That have a license with Palm Springs. So that was a different brochure. And at that point, obviously, we didn't know about exchange programs for businesses. And we still, because AQMD hasn't issued their guidelines, we don't know what to say to them. So this flyer is a flyer to residents. This blower workshop that you're referring to, would that also be open to businesses, or would it be, or that workshop? Because I thought Amy said that we were going to do a workshop for landscape businesses. And
I don't know that that's been discussed. I don't know why it wouldn't be. It'll be a free workshop, so
okay.
I would assume, I mean, I can double check with Amy to see what her
Okay.
ideas are. It will be presented in Spanish, and they will have a translator to do, so it'll be English and Spanish for the workshop. But you're right, I only had heard of it as being for businesses.
Pardon me,
I only had thought of it as being for businesses.
okay, you also understood that you thought the workshop was for businesses, not for
Residents.
a regular
Or
homeowner,
homeowners,
property
right.
owner. Okay, all right.
There are a few people who still do their own lawn in Palm Springs,
Yeah,
so.
so I guess I'm thinking if there is a workshop, I mean, this flyer could go out to homeowners, but it could also be remailed out again to
Correct.
the licensed businesses as well, as kind of a second reminder, couldn't it?
It could be, yeah. It's more as a reminder to the residents that, you know, to let their gardeners know what's going on as well as a reminder. But, this will just be a one-page, I understood it to be just like a half a page, you know, mailer, but it's just like a postcard, a big postcard.
Okay.
But it'll go out to like 15,000 addresses.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Baker.
What's the approximate cost of a new non-gas leaf blower?
Battery-powered ones can run 150 to 300 if for a non-commercial grade, for a residential grade. A corded one you can get for $7,500.
Commercial is much higher.
Yeah.
They're 500 and more because they're backpack
Yeah,
type.
most homeowners would not want to buy unless they own 3 acres, and if they own 3 acres, they probably don't do it themselves. So, so probably most homeowners are not going to spend more than $100 to $200.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Rake or a broom.
Yeah.
Or vacuum.
You speak like Commissioner Wilson. All right, thank you, gentlemen, for that report, and we appreciate the continuing updates from your office as new information unfolds.
As soon as we know, we'll let you know.
Okay. Item 2, report on the status of hiring a manager for the Office of Sustainability, and Commissioner Goins and Vice Chair Clark and whoever else has information. Vice Chair Clark or whoever. Speak, Roy.
Okay. The finalists are going to be interviewed tomorrow.
Okay.
There are 2 finalists.
Okay. All right. And I guess given that it's a personnel matter, that's probably as much information as we can say. All right. Thank you very much. So that'll be interesting to see how that proceeds. All right. We're at new business. And at the last meeting, we asked Commissioner Baker if he would help us in leading a discussion on a possible ordinance regulating tobacco, smoking and tobacco product use. So, and I know there's also been some action by City Council. You will
Yeah, so the
leave it to
city
you.
council did address this issue, and so they have passed the first prong, which was enforcing the Riverside County tobacco sales ordinance. So that goes into effect in 30 days, which would be November
Thank you.
So that means any retail outlet that sells tobacco is going to need to have
To check IDs and
they're going to have to get a license.
Yeah, and they will be random checks, just like alcohol sales, et cetera.
Okay, all right.
So that's a done deal. So next, we moved on to the city is actually going to consider a resolution to ban smoking in their December city council meeting. What you have before you on the screens are just some talking points that we distilled to discuss in this group as we decide whether or not what recommendations, if any, we would give to the city council to provide them guidance regarding this anti-smoking ban.
So Commissioner Baker, you're saying that you understand council is planning to agendize this item
in December
at one of their December meetings?
Correct.
Okay, so that means we have tonight and our November meeting to say anything we want to say.
Correct.
All right.
So turning your attention to the sheet in front of you, the one-pager, you can read the intro to yourself, but really there we kind of took the top 10 issues for discussion. So starting with number 1 is supporting the state's definition of tobacco, which includes marijuana and any other type of product such as chewing tobacco, snuff, et cetera. So it'll all be lumped into one thing. So marijuana and cigarette smoke, tobacco smoke will be considered the same. Any questions on that point? Sure.
So there are a couple of issues here. There are items that you can smoke, and there are items that are or are not tobacco. And so maybe there are other areas of the ordinance where those, so you can ingest cannabis and you can smoke cannabis. You can ingest tobacco and you can chew tobacco. And if this is a smoking ordinance, do we want to deal with all of those, or do we want to just deal with smoke? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I follow 100%.
So if it's a smoking ordinance, then the ban maybe should be about any items that will be smoked that would have harmful effects of some sort to the lungs or to the environment of some sort.
Well, it does say smoking and tobacco product use, chew, snuff related products.
Right, I'm suggesting that the definition be clarified to either not include ingestible forms of tobacco or cannabis, basically, is.
Well, that is my understanding. We're only talking about the physical vapor smoke. If you can have a transdermal patch for nicotine, or you could have marijuana candies. That's not infecting the air of the people around you. The whole point is to create an environment where your habit of ingesting whatever you want via a smoke delivery device is not infringing upon everyone around you.
Then why does it say chew?
That's the law. The way the state looks at it is it looks at all those products equally, because you have to be over 21 to buy chewing tobacco, or 18 if you're in the military. So the state clumps those together. It wasn't anything we decided to isolate chewing tobacco. The tobacco product is regulated, and marijuana is now looked in. So same in the vehicular code or anything else, marijuana and cigarettes, or marijuana and alcohol in terms of drinking and driving, or smoking marijuana and driving, are illegal. Number 2, supporting current federal and state smoke-free policies in multi-unit housing spaces and common areas. So this one, there has been a lot of debate. When I lived in Santa Monica, this ordinance passed, and I lived in an apartment, and there was a lot of public interest on this because it's sort of regulating what you can do in your own living environment. However, there are studies that show that smoking in your apartment or your single condo can go through a common ventilation system, or out of your apartment into apartment above you. So that's the rationale behind it. Again, it doesn't affect people who live in a single family dwelling. It's only the multi-unit housing. Any questions or clarification needed?
No, go ahead.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking maybe at this point we just get clarification and if we don't understand it, and then when we get to the end, we can talk about the whole
All
thing.
right, okay. Then
Yeah.
we can just move a little more quickly then. Where are we? Number 3, support current state case law for HOAs requiring common spaces to be smoke-free. Support of smoke-free patios and other outdoor spaces such as restaurants, bars, and lounges, as well as work and break areas for employees. Smoke-free public events, festival, parades, farmers markets, street fests, village fests, swimming pools, kind of hard to swim and smoke, but skate parks, water parks, etc. Smoke-free in all queues like ATMs or bus lines or any transportation ticket lines, theaters. Support smoke-free public transportation conveyances, buses, taxis. I'm assuming that would also incorporate ride share, although we don't define whether ride shares go in if that takes place or not. Supporting 25-foot buffer zone, which is already in existence for most businesses. You cannot smoke within 25 feet of a business establishment. But this, yes.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we need to be sure we understand each of these bullet points. We can debate their interest from this commission, but please. Yes.
Okay, so on that point, the 25-foot buffer zone, it sort of piggybacks off the public transportation point just prior to that. But clearly, there's going to be people smoking and do smoke in their automobiles now that either park near a business or when they queue in front of a light. Is that part of that matrix of 25 feet and how?
No, the idea behind the 25 feet is basically for a building. So for instance, City Hall or any hospital, you go there, it'll say no smoking within 25 feet of a door. So that's like when someone's taking their break, you can't just step immediately outside the door and light up. You have to at least walk further enough away from the door that people coming and going. It's that being in your vehicle is a wholly different situation.
So, not that I do, but I could be smoking some substance in my car and sit there on the street 15 feet away from a door, and I'm not in violation of that?
In theory, yes. Okay, where did we leave off? 25, support carefully designed, highly visible, effective signage, and supporting citation penalty options that include a singly or a combination of financial, community service, or successful smoking cessation programs. Those are the top 10 issues.
Okay.
One clarification.
Yes, Vice Chair Clark.
Looking at item 5, it starts by talking about public events and lists events, but it then goes to referring to swimming pools, skate parks, water parks, which are really facilities. So is there a clarification there between events and facilities?
Other than the events take place in the facility, I don't see a distinction between the two. So you're saying you could have a festival that takes place wholly inside of a single-family resident, then it wouldn't qualify.
What I'm thinking of is, when you mentioned swimming pools, is that just events at swimming pools?
No,
Or
you
is it
can't
swimming
smoke.
pools all the time?
The pool, well, because I swim every morning, so I know this as a fact. Since it's in part of our parks and recreation, there's no smoking allowed anywhere on that facility.
And that would be the same for these other facilities?
Correct. And that's already in existence in our city. That's not anything new.
Okay, thank you.
And likewise, HOAs could have their own prohibitive rules. Businesses may choose to be smoke-free or not. Certain.
There are some carve-outs for like cigar lounges and things like that,
Right.
but those are various. There's hookah lounges. There's some cigar lounges. Private clubs would still be allowed to have products that. And actually, I spoke with someone who owns one of the marijuana distributors here, dispensaries here, and they're considering opening a lounge where you could go in and ingest marijuana any way you want in a closed environment.
Great. Commissioners, Commissioner Santora.
Yeah, on that topic, I'm not even sure if it's still there, but there was a cigar lounge on Palm Canyon right downtown. You're saying that has a carve-out or?
Yes, when the initial smoking rules did allow they're sort of like private clubs, the hookah lounges and cigar lounges. You can purchase a cigar and smoke them inside that establishment.
Okay, but they have a patio area on the sidewalk.
Yeah, so that would, I'm not exactly sure, Bob or Paul, do you?
It's completely enclosed.
That would go away.
The patio part would go away. Yeah.
Yeah, because the existing ones are so close to other businesses.
Would only be able to smoke inside that establishment. And that hookah lounge, which is upstairs, wouldn't be able to be out because part of it's open air on a patio.
I think it's important that we have as thorough a conversation tonight, because we could have a resolution and then further conversation at the November meeting. So commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Santora.
I hate to hog up the time here. Commissioner McCann, if you want to go for it, go for it.
I'm sorry. Did you have your hand up?
I did, but we both did, so.
It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
I have the following issue and question. I am aware anecdotally, but I've never read any actual specific studies or reports, that if you are in an enclosed environment where there is a smoker, so that you are exposed to secondhand smoke a lot of the time of your existence, that there are definable, demonstrable secondhand smoke hazards to your health. Now, let's go to the next level. There are many people who occasionally go to a bar and they will walk out onto the patio where there is secondhand smoke because other people are smoking there. If that is the extent of your exposure to secondhand smoke in your life, what is the demonstrable impact on your health? In other words, you are exposed to secondhand smoke for a couple of hours a week. Thirdly, what if you are out on a golf course or you're on a hiking trail and you come across some secondhand smoke incidentally because somebody else in that environment has been smoking? What is the, if any, demonstrable impact on your health of that kind of very incidental and very unusual contact with secondhand smoke? I think you get where I'm going with this. Are we actually considering here making it a criminal offense to smoke on a hiking trail? And if somebody is caught, they're going to have consequences. And what is our basis for such a law? The only one I can see is that if there are demonstrable impacts on my health of that kind of incidental contact. And if there is not, then I don't see how I could support it.
First of all, for the patio at a bar, the major concern are for the employees who are there more than an incidental minute or two walking in or out of a bar. They're there many days a week, working several hours, serving drinks, serving food. So that's how the initial smoking bans started in California, was for employee health. Now, as it comes to hiking trails or a golf course where you're sort of in an open air environment and it's not confined, I'm not aware of any medical studies, but by the same token, you inhale bus fumes, exhaust fumes in your day-to-day life. You're not going to live in a bubble, but the idea is to prevent you from going into any type of business establishment and sort of being forced to inhale secondhand smoke.
Okay, that sounds very reasonable to me. And if I was going to try to come to a cutoff point here, if I think that this is overreaching.
Okay, Commissioner Santora.
Yeah, both Commissioner Friedman and I have raised the issue about the enforcement mechanisms here. So the last bullet item talks about that, citation and penalty. Who are the enforcement agencies, and is there cost related to that we should know about?
The devil's in the details on this one, because say you are hiking and someone is smoking a cigarette ahead of you or behind you. I mean, there's effectively no way you can report that to the police officer or file a report. It's like, oh, yeah, the person with the orange shirt with the Braves baseball cap was smoking. So there are some limitations to that. Again, it's trying to protect if you're in your condo or apartment and someone is constantly smoking outside and it's coming in, you have little children or not, you're a senior citizen, you just don't want to inhale that smoke, then that would be your remedy.
I see that as the problem, but not the remedy. So let's say that scenario, my neighbor is smoking on their patio and they don't stop. Who do I report to? Who follows up? Who issues the citation, and what's the cost of that?
Bob and Paul, correct me wrong, but that's yeah, you guys want to, may they approach?
If there's a question that you
Yeah,
can't
I can't
answer,
answer that
feel
one, so I'll defer,
free to
yes, to
call upon
the experts.
one of them to answer. And just for the recording and for the record.
I'm Robert Heimbaugh. And I'm Paul Henriksen. There's a couple of questions on the table that I think need to be addressed. To your question, Commissioner McCann, there was a study done about patio smoke around bars, and I've got the citation back there, but I know that when this particular city reduced the smoking on patio bars, the secondhand smoke was reduced by 20% over a 2-month period initially, and in the area of the bar itself. So casually, a person going there once or twice a week, they may have some exposure to it, but the cumulative effect of the area, of the air in that area is more significant to the people who are working there, to people who may be adjacent to that particular area, as opposed to a person such as yourself who may or may not go but once every 2 weeks or something like that, or to persons like us who we walk in the middle of arenas when the street is closed because we don't want to go to the area. I think there's another aspect to the hiking trails that goes beyond, you're not going to be affected by the smoke. And that is not a smoking issue as much as it is a hazard issue to the trails themselves. The risk of setting something on fire and setting the mountainside on fire, and the littering aspect. We've never addressed the littering aspect of smoking, which is a critical issue. When in Santa Monica, when they go to clean up the beach area, the single most littered aspect of the beaches are cigarette butts. And you go through the park over here, Sunrise Park. Number one item, cigarette butts. The second most significant thing that we're finding these days are syringes.
Thank you for that feedback. That gives me a larger picture of why we might support this than just the secondhand smoke health issue.
You're right. And if I may address also, according to the CDC, there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. And it's also known to cause sudden infant death syndrome. It causes sudden onset heart attack and stroke. And we were talking about public areas where people fluidly move in and out of. Then bring it back to residential. What if you live in an apartment building or a condo and your neighbor likes to sit out on their patio and smoke? It's very difficult to avoid that, and it is harmful. 73,000 people die every year, according to the CDC, from secondhand smoke. These are people who choose not to smoke. Even leaf blowers don't come close to that. So there's also a new issue arising as a result of cannabis being legalized and recreationally. There's exposure to cannabis for people who have random drug testing, whether they work for an airline, whether they work for a government contractor, the military, and they are now starting to find people having false positive drug results, and it can destroy a career, as well as kill somebody, seriously harm them. And then let's talk about who's being exposed. So there are
differing results from person to person. All of our chemistry is different. Some people are highly susceptible to harm from secondhand smoke. And then there comes the other end of the spectrum of people who it doesn't bother them and they don't seem to have any suffering or harm as a result of their exposure. So they may be less concerned. But then there's so many people who have weak immune systems because either they're young, very young, they're very old, or they have illnesses. Those people deserve protection. So as much as one might look to what might be the rights of a smoker, technically there aren't any legal rights to smoke. There isn't a law in the United States that exists granting that right or protecting that right. It's a tolerated existence, but there's no legislation requiring that. So I think it's really important. All of us sitting around this table, except for this young man, tend to be a little bit older, and we come from a period where we had been indoctrinated by the concepts and the thinking of the tobacco industry. Many of us sitting around this table can remember a time where smoking took place everywhere. In the grocery stores, in the hospitals, in the elevators, you name it, they did. And I see Joe wants to stop me. I'll cut it.
I do.
Yeah.
I only want to stop you because I want this to be a commissioner discussion, and I want you gentlemen to answer specific questions that Carl can't. And so I don't want the commissioners not to have a chance to ask and speak. And I have a question, and perhaps another commissioner does as well. Commissioner Goins.
So there are several issues for me in the way this is written. I think for me, the top issue is we should be treating tobacco and cannabis differently. I think it's completely fair to regulate where cannabis can and cannot be, ingested or smoked differently than is the case for tobacco. And I'm not saying, where you should smoke cannabis should be a wider bubble than where you could smoke tobacco, but I think they should be handled differently. And that's my first issue. And the second issue is I just can't get around, for me, at this point, smoking in your own private residence, someplace that you've rented. In terms of building codes, we don't go back, we don't say it's 2018, we're going to have everybody retrofit to, every building that was built in 1920 has to be retrofitted to 2018 standards. But I feel like that's, in a way, what you're doing is you're saying, it's 2018, we have a new understanding, this place that you're living in doesn't necessarily meet the way we want to live now, but so we're going to penalize you. For a place where someone lives, I just can't.
If I may address that, the government has already prohibited smoking in all Section 8 housing. So any government subsidized housing in the entire country is smoke-free. So to that end, it's a fait
I think that's
already.
Different than a privately rented apartment.
It is your privately rented apartment. It's just being subsidized by the government.
But those that aren't.
So let me, so that, I think that's part of my question of trying to understand the second bullet point as well. So I do understand, I'm sorry, Commissioner Goins, can I just tag on to this for understanding? So if it's a federally or state subsidized facility, rental facility, those restrictions are already imposed.
Correct.
So let's assume that it's an apartment building in Palm Springs that does not have any of those subsidies, or a condo complex that's either one level with adjacent patios, or there are some 2 and 3 level condo buildings with stacked patios. What is the second bullet point saying? Is it saying only that this resolution or ordinance would only ban smoking where there's federal subsidy, or is it saying it would ban it in all locations, in all multi?
All multi.
It is saying all multi.
Correct.
So
I'm just saying it already exists.
So certainly
in federal subsidies.
some apartment buildings could have their own, even without a state subsidy, could have their own prior regulations. The
Correct.
building owner, or could have, and an HOA could likewise have its own regulations. But if an HOA didn't have its own regulations, then that means
It
you know,
depends on the
the four of
HOA.
us have condos next to each other, and
It would
and
depend
Roy
whether
could-
they're attached or single family. I mean, you can have HOA where you have a single family
Right,
home.
right. So, but I'm talking about attached condos. So John, Roy, and Robert and I are all in a fourplex of a condo building, and Roy smokes. This would, I'm trying to understand. So this would prohibit Roy from smoking inside his condo or out on his patio.
That is correct.
Both places. Even though inside his own condo, he has his own separate air handling unit for heating and air conditioning. It's not connected to the neighbors because they're all, metered separately. But the idea is that the smoke would pervade the walls or the ceiling. Is that?
That's the idea. Again, it comes down to if he's doing that and it's indistinguishable by his neighbors, no one would ever know, and no one's going to come knock on his door. But in theory, yes, that's how the law
Okay, so
is
in
structured.
theory, Roy might be able to smoke in his living room with the door shut.
In theory, yes.
But if I walked by, if it was weather like now and I walked by and smelled it, I could phone up because he's not the guy in the
That is
in
correct.
the
Or if you have
Lakers
visitors
cap.
smoking or renters.
Yeah, I know where he lives, so I could
That is
report.
correct.
Okay, all right. All of that was, sorry, just trying to understand bullet 2. Let me go back to you, Commissioner Goins. I leapt into the middle of your questions.
I think you were very clear in your question, so I thank you for that. And
I would like
got at
you
the
to
crux of
clarify,
it.
though, why would you draw the distinction between marijuana versus tobacco smoke? Why should they be treated differently?
I think that a lot of what a lot of your arguments here are related to other people's definitions, the state of California, the federal government. The state of California and the federal government at this point do treat cannabis very differently. And so if we're going to, well, California, it may be legal in California, but it's not legal federally. So, I mean, I feel like the decision to treat them separately only makes sense given our current legislative climate.
But we only have control over the state of California and the city of Palm Springs. And
Right, I mean, that in the city of Palm Springs, we should have a separate ordinance for where you can smoke cannabis and where you can smoke tobacco. I think that first clarification would help you guys move this forward.
What's your perception of what it is now?
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just trying to offer some constructive and helpful thoughts, is that if they were separated, maybe one would move forward and one would not, and, but, that level of clarification would help people make some decisions here. And I think the issue about multifamily housing might be the other one, that if there was some
No, that is
some
controversial.
clarification.
To be sure, that is definitely a controversial issue to tell someone who is renting a dwelling what they can and cannot do, a legal activity in their own dwelling.
If I rented in 2017 with the expectation that I can smoke, and now in 2018 I can't smoke, then what does that mean about this lease that I signed? And, I'm not an attorney, but it feels like I don't think I'd be happy about that I rented an apartment in 2017 with one expectation and it changed in 2018.
The legal argument for that is the landlord is not changing the lease, the city is changing your rights, not your landlord.
The law.
Yeah.
But there would be no place else they could go here in the city, so.
Your car.
All right. Commissioner Santora.
Thanks. So you guys were invited up to help answer a question that was not answered. Maybe you can answer it now. Sure. On the enforcement piece.
I love this question. It happens organically. There's a reason no one's smoking in this room right now. There's and so many other places that we go, there was a period of time where people did. What changed? The law changed. People became accustomed to it and began to respect it. There aren't police officers going around and writing tickets and chastising people for smoking in this building or other places, most other places where it's just become common knowledge that smoking shouldn't take place. There will be a period of time where there's an educational process as a result of a change that people will have to become educated and become aware of it. And just as when smoking in inside restaurants and bars changed, for example, there were people who defied it. That didn't last very long. They became accustomed to it, and they're not attempting to do it anymore. That was a very short period of time. That happens, but for the most part, right away people start to abide by the law.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation.
It's not a new experiment.
I understand, but it is a new ordinance for the city of Palm Springs that we're
Right.
talking about.
Mhm.
So I think for me personally, I want to know what the city's enforcement mechanisms are going to be and what the cost of that is going to be. And while we're on that enforcement track, one of the things that your question raised for me is that we have just come so far in decriminalizing cannabis use, and now we're criminalizing it again in another form. I think there's going to be a ton of pushback. So to the extent that we are very transparent about the enforcement mechanisms, the reasoning for both, and making sure people feel who worked very hard for decriminalization don't
Including
feel like
us.
they're being thwarted once again with all these different regulations from city, state, and the feds. I think for us as a community, it is beneficial that not only this commission, the city council, but the residents, more importantly, understand the full picture before we move forward. So that's my point.
Let me
with the
briefly
enforcement.
address that.
May I-
Oh,
may I speak?
Wait, let me.
Not the chairman, so I'll
Well,
defer.
I think we heard your opinion. Let me let the rest of the commissioners speak.
Okay, sure. There's some good points to
Commissioner
address.
I think my question is going to let you respond to him directly. But when Commissioner Goins was talking about, well, I think there should be a different set of standards for cannabis smoke versus tobacco smoke because of different considerations at federal versus state levels, I'm not sure that's a good rationale. But there could be a good rationale for treating them separately if there are any studies or anything that we could go on that suggests that there are differences in secondhand smoke impacts of cannabis smoke versus tobacco smoke. Do you know of any?
Yes, I can address that. There is no difference. They're equally dangerous. It's carbonized, that makes it a carcinogen. And as far as where people can smoke cannabis, that's already established by the law. And that's one of the reasons we have actually gone to City Council and spoke in favor of the cannabis growers and dispensaries to establish cannabis lounges, because even our visitors who come and visit our city, we don't want them criminalized. And currently, cannabis is just like alcohol. You can't consume it in public. And most hotels, they don't permit it. So they're going to come here, they're going to purchase it, and they don't have a legal place to do it. That's why we have gone and spoke in favor of cannabis lounges. We want to make sure our visitors aren't criminalized and that other people have, even people who aren't visitors, have a safe, legal place to consume cannabis. It's the right thing to do.
Okay, hold on just a minute. Commissioner Baker, you had said you have to leave by 6:30. So we have about 5 minutes. And so I want to just clarify a couple of things. So we probably want to have on the November agenda something, a resolution. In fact, what you have written for us in this single-page document sounds like it could be a motion for the November meeting. The Sustainability Commission endorses the following concepts, your 10 bullet points. That could be the basis for a motion, and then we could debate whether or not we like all 10 of those, or if we want to negotiate in some way and exclude one or more, or vote the whole thing up or the whole thing down. Is that likely a process that we would follow in November?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, all right. And I think just what we are doing is speaking on behalf of the Sustainability Commission. This will ultimately be the council's decision. It'll be the council's decision to figure out how penalties and how they're going to communicate and enforce, and it'll be significantly complaint-driven, except for businesses where it's a much more public experience. And under bullet 4, I'm certain that it's not our responsibility, it'll be council's work to communicate with businesses that would be affected and get feedback from those businesses about what they think. We don't have to worry about that issue, because we're not being asked about that. We're being asked for sort of a sense of the topic, right? Would that be right, Commissioner Baker?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. So, shall we, since you're the chair of the Wellness Subcommittee, is this from the not the statement of goal, but from the words Sustainability Commission endorses, would that be your recommendation for a motion at the next meeting?
Yes, that would be the recommendation for November Sustainability Commission meeting.
Okay, all right, okay. I just wanted to be sure I heard that from you before you got out of the room, and then we can take just, we've been at this a while, I think. So we'll take another couple of questions, and then I think we better move on. Commissioner Futterman.
It was my understanding when you first presented this that you were going to revise, I think, how you maybe worded about multi-unit housing, and so that low-income people wouldn't feel like they were being penalized for not having more income to have a single house. I can't remember what it's called. So that was one thing. It doesn't look like that's reflected. I think that there should be a way to have a spot that people could ingest in some way, and I think that saying that you can have an edible, it's not the best way for some people to take their medicine, and it is considered a medicine right now. So something that you said is that people have died from it, and I've read studies that people have not died from cannabis use. Maybe from the smoke. I think it is different than tobacco. People are going to be smoking tobacco. If someone's smoking a cigarette, that's like a long duration of time smoking, and most people that smoke are not going to smoke that much. Somehow it seems like the smoke dissipates in the air, and so with the cigar clubs or something, to have those people then punished also to have it be closed in, those people that are smoking are also going to have more secondhand smoke, and you could say, well, they're choosing to smoke, but to not, I don't know, it seems unfair in some ways. I don't think that people should be able to smoke, and I think a lot of this is good.
I think the fairness question looks more towards those who choose not to smoke, because I'm taking my habit and I'm enforcing you to enjoy it with me. So by isolating it, I am no longer forcing my habit upon you. In cold weather climates, there is no such thing as an outdoor patio. In Maine, in January, where you can go out and smoke your cigarette. In Europe, many bars have a tiny closet-sized space indoors for smoking during the winter months. So literally, it's like the size of a phone booth, and people are on top of each other smoking because they can't go outside and do it. So it is what's done all over the world. It's just we haven't become accustomed to it yet.
And people that would be going close to one of those places, that, I mean, they could also choose not to go close to one of those places. Or I don't really know how to make it so that that people wouldn't have to experience being close to that, except for, I don't know. I don't want to infringe on people's rights also. And I know that what we discussed before, you said, well, when one person's rights end, and begin, another person's rights end. And so, well, you said when one person's rights begin, another person's rights end, was the point, right, that you made. And I agree with that. And so when you made your point about being at a parade or anything, I agree. There shouldn't be any smoking where it can just be there. But someone at a multi-unit housing place, why couldn't there be a spot that people could smoke if they want to? If it was far away, or if, I don't know how to determine like how far away that would be, but It just,
No, I understand that was my initial concern as well. It seems to unfairly penalize people who choose not, or who either choose not to or cannot afford to own a single-family home. There is an inequity there in the essence of it by fiat.
And you raised the medicinal use issue as well, for people who are legitimately using it for pain or some other issue. You aren't planning to be anywhere else but here on November 20th, right, Commissioner Baker?
I am back in Palm Springs, yes, yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Want to be sure about that. Commissioner Goins.
I guess what I feel like I'm hearing for other commissioners, and it's never a good idea to speak for other people, but it's a little unclear. So it should be clear where people can smoke also, because it's pretty much a blanket. This is pretty broad here. So if it's clear where people can engage in the activity, that would help us. Right now, it's not clear where you can and cannot. I guess the second issue I have here is that this is really not it's an issue of it being too broad again. This really, from my perspective, what you guys want to do is limit secondhand smoke inhalation. And this is talking about things that you ingest. This is, talking about, it's just too broad. So if this was really a secondhand smoke regulation, that would really help. And the third thing I'll offer is that maybe a public interest campaign to help people sort of naturally get to the point that you want might work just as well. I mean, if your real goal here is to help people understand that, okay, we used to smoke in commission meetings, now we understand not to do that, maybe a nonprofit that communicates with the community to help them understand would be a better approach than, a broad ban in city council, or maybe both. I mean, I feel like all of that could help, because right now it feels a little too broad and a little too heavy-handed. So those are my thoughts.
All right. Thank you. I know you have other appointments you need to get to, and
for the record, this is my report is contained here.
Is complete. Yes. No item G6. Okay,
correct.
Fine. So yes. So commissioners, expect that. I don't know any other better way than what we've talked about. This will be the motion on the table. We'll see if we get a second, and if we get a second, we'll proceed with discussion, and we can see if we all agree on all 10. If we eliminate something, if we come up with a whole different motion, we'll see what we can do, and we'll see what we can do to perhaps minimize other parts of the agenda. I don't know whether this will take a long time or not. All right, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for your conversation. All right, believe it or not, we are going to be out of here, I think, by 7 o'clock, so we're going to keep moving on. We're at item F, 2, discussion and action on whether or not to include the flag salute as a regular agenda item. It was simply a part of protocol from the prior chair, and I continued it. I'm happy to discuss it. Is there someone who'd like to say something?
I would stand in favor of maintaining the pledge at the beginning of our meetings.
Okay, all right. Do you want to, you're putting that on record as your vote, if you can?
We were discussing, but
okay.
yeah.
Oh, all right, okay, all right.
And I stand in favor of eliminating it.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Santora.
If we're just discussing it, it's one thing, but I'm prepared to make a motion. Is that appropriate at this point?
Oh, we can hear a motion.
Okay, so I move to discontinue with the inclusion of the flag salute as a regular agenda item.
Okay, all right. So we've had a motion to discontinue use as a regular part of the agenda, and second from Commissioner Goins. So we're now in, I mean, that's the typical parliamentary way to do things. So now we are in official discussion. Does anyone have a comment they want to make?
Yeah, as the maker of the motion, I think I
Oh,
probably
yes, please,
should,
you can speak to it,
should
please.
do that.
I'm sorry. I should have invited you to speak to your own motion.
That's quite all right. So it was apparent to me from the first commission meeting that I attended that there was a level of discomfort at the pledge, just based on the auditory environment. And having discussions with individuals since that time, it just seems appropriate that some people feel imposed upon in different ways. And it's not a necessary function of the commission, and therefore it should not be a regular mandatory part of the agenda.
Okay, great. Does anyone else want to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Goins.
I think our time here would be better spent dealing with actual sustainability matters. So just as a time saver, I think it would be good to remove it.
Great. I see no other comments. All in favor of the motion as presented, say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Great. Okay, we are at item G, Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building. Commissioner Friedman is out of town. Commissioner Goins, do you, there was a written report submitted. Are there any parts of that you'd like to speak to?
I think it pretty much was, everything that needed to be stated was in the written report. So just for the sake of time, I'll move forward.
Okay, all right. Just at this particular moment, because it's the solar report, I did just want to give a shout out to David Friedman for his work on the fact that Palm Springs was awarded the 2018 Soul Smart recognition. I think we all got that email in early October, I think, Dan, is when you sent us that notification. You don't remember?
Don't remember
Okay.
exactly when it was.
Yes.
Was it September? Or
Pardon me? I'm sorry. I think it was early October as I was reading old email from my time away. In any event, I just wanted to give a recognition to David for his work on the Soul Smart Recognition Award, and also to staff as well, to Dan and Jay for the support that you gave in making that happen. So thank you about that. All right, we are at, and thank you, John, for the work that you're doing on this area as well.
Also, real quick, just as mentioned in the report, we do have the Energy Code training session on Monday, starting at 7:30 a.m. UCR Palm Desert. Any of you who would like to go, please register or show up. It'll be an exciting event.
Right. We got that PR information. Thank you. All right, we are at the Standing Committee on Waste Reduction. Commissioners McCann and Vice Chair Clark.
Okay, several items here. I'll go through them quickly. The first one, the C&D waste ordinance. We're still awaiting City Council action on the revised ordinance that we submitted to them in April. Issue 2, reducing polystyrene takeout containers and use of plastic straws for restaurants. J.R. Roberts has asked us in the past to look into this. As a result of that effort, on August 9th, we completed a draft ordinance for on-request only status of plastic straws. However, on September 20th, that was overtaken by events because Governor Brown signed California Assembly Bill 1884 into law, which prohibits full-service restaurants from providing single-use plastic straws except on request. As a result of that development, on October 2nd, Roy Clark and I met with Council Members Coors and Holstage to discuss modifications for this proposed ordinance in light of AB 1884. The consensus from the meeting is that we need to go back and make it the potential ordinance more expansive to cover more than just restaurants of a single or a certain size, to go for fast food restaurants and other food service establishments, bars, etc. And to bring it back into the purview of banning extended polystyrene food containers. So it was left there that they want more information about other municipalities, again in California, that have passed a more expansive ordinance than the state level, and what's the impact been on restaurants and other businesses. And so we're exploring that right now. Item 3, recycling containers in public parks. The deployment of all the new recycled containers in the parks have been completed, and I want to jump just quickly then to a recommendation We have noted that the bright blue recycle containers that we now have in our public parks are currently coexisting with bright blue trash containers that were placed in the parks at the beginning of the year. So to avoid confusion and decrease the rate of contamination of the waste stream that's going into our recycle containers, we would like to recommend that the city either replace those existing bright blue trash containers with the brown containers that they have placed downtown and in other areas, or just take these bright blue containers and paint them brown. I think either one would be fine.
All right, we'll come back to your recommendation at the end of your report and see if we want to have an action there.
All right. Item 4, the diverting and recycling the wet organic waste from the city's municipal solid waste stream. You all know about the ordinances and requirements that we've been discussing earlier tonight that are coming down the pike that are going to force us to divert more of our organics from landfill. The city of Palm Springs produces these days approximately 50,000 tons per year of municipal solid waste. The wet organics fraction, the food waste essentially, is about 30 to 40% of that is an estimate. And to meet the increasingly stringent requirements to divert, we've been exploring with Energia Corporation a proposal to use their technologies and their equipment to extract the wet fraction from the undifferentiated municipal solid waste stream that we have right now, deliver that to anaerobic digestion facilities at the Palm Springs wastewater treatment facility, and convert that fraction into energy. So latest developments there on October 2nd. I presented an overview of Energia's proposal to council members Coors and Holstage and other potential stakeholders. The feedback was positive, and the council members requested additional information on whether similar Energia projects in the state of California have gone, what their scope has been, and how they've been funded in particular. So collected that information, gathered it up, and provided it to the council members in an email on October 17th. The next step is then we need to prepare a staff report that goes back to Energia and says, okay, the next step on from your perspective is you want to do a more detailed proposal with specifying costs for all the different components, but they need approximately $70K to do that. And so the approval process, city council has to approve that, the city manager has to approve it, and we sustainability commission members have to approve it. So we've gone back to Energia, and they are now in the process of preparing that more detailed report on what the proposal would entail. And we're waiting for them on that. It should be here within the week. I want to just say parenthetically too, Commissioner Goins, you had some issues at this October 2nd meeting that I thought were pretty interesting. It was you would like to have a better, bigger picture of the waste stream that's coming from Palm Springs and whether these measures that we're considering to divert it might entail restricting future options and other ways that this might work. So I took that into consideration, and I think it's going to be in work, and I'm going to try to include it as part of the staff report. A better breakdown of the waste stream now, how much of it is coming from our garbage pails in our residents, how much of it is construction and demolition debris, and how these things that we're considering would impact those. Let's see. Number 5, battery recycling project. As we reported last meeting, the city of Palm Springs was awarded a grant from Cal Recycle in the amount of about $35,000 to do the battery recycle. On October 10th, Roy and I met with city employees Dan DeGarmo, Jay Verada, and Harriet Barron met with Barbara Baker from Cal Recycle, and we discussed guidelines, best practices, and reporting requirements for implementing the project with the grant money. All went well, and my impression at the end of that meeting is that there is some approvals then that have to happen in the next month or two, and then we'll be able to get started with the project. Roy, do you want to add anything to that?
I have nothing to add.
All right. Item 6, towards consistency in waste container form and design across downtown areas, parks, and commercial establishments. And I just made that up tonight as item 6. But I want to read this because Prior to the city council meeting on October 3rd, Roy Clark became aware that the city was considering allocating funding to purchase additional trash recycle containers similar to the ones that have been deployed in the downtown area from last year on a trial basis. And there was a motion on the table to approve expenditure of, it was either at $200,000 or $300,000 level. Close to three. So it was a fairly, and to buy something like 150 of those joint recycle at the top and trash at the bottom containers. In response, I provided with Councilmember Roberts a written concern about the containers prior to the meeting. They aren't color differentiated, and there were some other problems with them, so we pointed that out. And as a result, we've proven that you can fight City Hall. It was removed from City Council's meeting and has been tabled until we can get more information to them. And last but not least, outreach and community education, also a point I just came up with tonight. On October 18th, Commissioners Friedman and myself met with Dan DeGarmo to discuss topics suitable for submitting as a proposal for a Sustainability Commission workshop at the 2019 Neighborhoods USA Conference, or NUSA Conference, which is going to be held May 15th to 18th, 2019. Dan and David and I are going to meet later this week to try to finalize a little bit more of the topics, but I think at this point we're thinking of two of them. One will be something to do with best practices for waste management in a city the size of Palm Springs, so we can summarize all this work that we've been doing there. And the other one is a solar initiative that David's been working on. So the workshop is 75 minutes, I believe, and we might divide it in half for those two topics. All right, done.
All right, so given your recommendation at the end of your report and your statement on item 6, would it be helpful if tonight, if some commissioner wanted to move something to the effect that the Sustainability Commission recommends that there be consistency in design and color of recycling and trash containers to conform to the norms of blue for recycling and brown for trash?
Yes.
Would we want to have some motion like that, which would then go to City Council and Parks and Rec and facilities staff? All right. You said yes.
I said yes.
You'd be interested in someone making that motion?
You just did, and I seconded it.
The chair does not make a motion.
Well, the wording is good. So
So who's making it?
Didn't it come from both of them since they're on the committee?
Well, it is in a sense in your report, but it's not written exactly like a motion, but.
Yeah, but I'll advance the motion.
It's made by Commissioner McCann and seconded by Commissioner Clark.
with your words.
Okay, all right, which are on record. Commissioner Goins, did you have your hand up for a comment?
I was actually going to,
Oh, make the motion?
if no one else did.
Okay.
We're there already.
All right, we're there already. All right, is there discussion? Commissioner Wilson.
I was wondering if maybe there's some paint that's been turned in someplace that's brown, so we could reuse some existing paint to paint some blue trash cans.
We can check at Home Depot, see if there's any oops paint.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. I see no other hands up.
I think
Oh.
it's important that we recycle the current trash cans rather than just replace them.
If that's the point, I think yes. But I do think working toward consistency across the city, to the point of your report, makes sense. So, all right, yes.
I think the bigger issue is not so much the blue cans that are there now. They're plastic, they may be hard to paint. There aren't that many of them, but the bigger issue is going forward. And
Spending $200,000 or $300,000 on the wrong cans.
On the wrong cans, and looking at we've done a great project with parks, with the containers that have been placed there. We need to look at downtown and other areas as well.
Right. right? So yes, so it's really an issue going forward. All right, all in favor of the motion say yes?
Yes.
All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, thank you for your report.
Mr. Chair, just one question. I supported the motion, but I do have a question for you on the straw ordinances and state law. So, not to be stupid about this, but is it any kind of plastic hollowed device, including like the stirrers that are used for coffee and for cocktails? Or is there some dimensions that are outlined in the law?
I think it's comprehensive, but that's a guess on my part rather than a concrete knowledge answer. I think so it would encompass the small ones as well as the larger ones.
Sorry, I didn't ask for questions. Yes, Commissioner Goins.
So on the Energia project, during the discussions about hiring a sustainability manager, one of the things we're talking about is there somebody who can actually execute a big visionary project that's really going to help the city. So I think that that's really, really important, and this is exactly that kind of project. And so I want to thank you for pushing it forward, and I want to thank you for listening to my comments at the meeting on October 2nd. As we move forward with the need to compost and reduce our waste more and more, we need to be flexible. And so one concern I had, it sounds like you're going to address it, is whether or not the slurry that comes out of the end of this machine is going to be something that we can continue to use as diversion material, right? Is this slurry just going to be so uniform that we can no longer remove the inorganics and the organics? So that's one question. My second question, and I didn't mention at the October 2nd meeting, was this project is going to be, a number that was thrown out is $10 million, and it's going to take a lot of planning entitlements. I doubt it would just be a simple city set of entitlements. It probably is going to be, going to require some county government, probably going to require CEQA. It will be a long-term process, and these diversion requirements are happening now within the next 2 years. So as of right now, my sense is that maybe this is a long-term project, but we have short-term needs. So I'm wondering how we balance that. If it takes us 5 years to permit, finance, and build this thing, but we right now have the need to divert what we have to divert, and we're getting fines, it doesn't really help us. So that was my second question. Now, I don't know, if you can answer it tonight, that's great, but I also wanted to put that out there as something to discuss.
I think it's a really important point. Gary said earlier that he thought that the additional amount of wet organics that's going to have to be diverted from landfill starting on January 1st may overwhelm that facility down at Burtech next year. He wasn't sure. He said, but we were going to get the short side of the stick if it does. Yeah, this project is not going to answer that if it's several years in construction. And I don't have a good solution to this problem. It's a really big problem.
So perhaps that's a topic for you to have with Gary Calhoun or other staff offline to follow that question, that line of questioning. I mean, it's an important question, but one we can't answer tonight. I'm sorry, I was moving us along. Are we at item 3? Ad hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning? Anything to say tonight? It's fine to say no.
Yeah, no, right now we're just waiting on a response from the Southern California Association of Governments in terms of the status of our pedestrian and safe routes to school grant.
Okay, grant, okay, all right. Item 4, the film festival programs. Do you have anything you need to report tonight?
We have a meeting tomorrow scheduled with Tim, I've forgotten his name. Tim and Megan Goring, and Tim at the Pacific Palm Springs Cultural Center.
Great. So you'll have information for us
We will.
at the next meeting. Perfect. All right. Item 5, Ad hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling. Jim Flanagan is here. Jim, do you have anything you need to say tonight?
I'm going to have a subcommittee report next time. We have a group that's assembled, and we're going to meet November 1st, and you've seen the emails.
Okay. All right. So we'll expect a report then. Commissioner Baker said there was no additional report. Commissioner Friedman is not here for water. Commissioner Futterman, anything on outreach? I thought you were all going to make me out to be a liar, that we wouldn't get out by 7, but we might. Are there commissioner comments?
I have one.
Yes, Vice Chair Clark.
Last Wednesday at the library, the lecture that was sponsored by the Commission on butterfly migration and desert milkweed as habitat was held, and 40 people were in attendance.
Wow. That's a big group. Yeah. Any other comments? I do want to just encourage all of you, to the extent that you can get reports submitted. If there is an agenda item, we work on the agenda slightly more than a week out. So if there's an agenda item or a motion you want on the agenda, please get it to Dan or Roy and myself. And to the extent that you can get your committee reports out in time for them to be out on the Thursday prior to our Tuesday meeting, we are dealing with big issues, and you all are all doing a lot of stuff. But to the extent that commissioners have a chance to read and absorb that, we might actually get more discussion in if we've had those reports sooner. So thank you for that. Is there a motion that we adjourn until our next regular meeting on Tuesday, November 20th? So moved by Commissioner Santora, second from Commissioner Gauthier. All in favor say yes. Yes. And we are adjourned at 6:56 p.m.